Hello, sports fans. Jim Coyle with Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Thank you for stopping by our YouTube channel. Make sure to hit the subscribe and notifications toggle so you never miss a thing. All of our content up here every day. Looking forward to it. Thank you, and we'll see you on the radio. Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio, here on this Tuesday from the Hard Truth Distilling Company studios. And special guest today, Evan Miyakawa. Is that how you say your name correct, first of all?
Yes.
I want to make sure because it looks pretty simple, but sometimes they're tricky. But Evan Miyakawa, who I have nicknamed the stats doctor of college basketball because he is a doctor. He's got a PhD in stats, people. He's a data scientist. You've seen him everywhere, ESPN, CBS, The Athletic, all over, Rivals, everywhere. And we're fortunate to have him on Indiana Sports Beat Radio today. Evan, thank you, first of all, for taking time to be with us today, man.
Glad to be here, Jim. Lots of interesting things to discuss in college basketball in the Big Ten with Indiana specifically. So I'm excited about this.
Yeah, me too. But first, I want to talk about the SEC. My God, every time you turn around, not only it's already known that they're the strongest basketball conference in the country this year, which is crazy, but they keep adding teams that are not the teams that you would expect. Mississippi State was already kind of up there, but that's a surprise. Of course, Chris Beard at Ole Miss, he's got them ranked. And now Georgia is jumping into the party. Haven't been ranked in 14 years, man. The SEC has just become a juggernaut in basketball.
Yeah, the SEC is arguably right now the greatest college basketball conference that we've ever seen. Obviously, we have to wait and see how the rest of the season shapes up, and ultimately, a lot of that's dictated by how many teams you get in the tournament. But this conference, we knew coming into the year that this was going to be a deep conference, but we didn't know that this would also be the most elite conference at the top. If you look right now at my team ratings at evanmia.com, the SEC has 5 of the top 11 teams in the country. You have Auburn at 2, Alabama at 5, Florida 6, Tennessee 9, Mississippi State 11. But then really there's not like a drop off anywhere else. Your worst 2 teams are LSU and South Carolina, but they're still kind of inside the top 90 or so. And all the rest of the teams are basically perennial top 50 teams, all good enough to make the tournament if they play well over the next month or two. It's pretty outrageous what we're seeing from the SEC.
The SEC tournament is going to be a blast for people that get to cover that. That's going to be something. I talked about the Big Ten being a meat grinder this year. It's nothing compared to that thing, man. That's a slaughterhouse.
Yeah, the Big Ten is like still, in terms of depth, just as good as the SEC, but they don't have any of those elite teams. The best team in the Big Ten probably would shape up to be the 5th or 6th best team in the SEC. So that's really where the difference is between those two conferences.
Are we talking about football or basketball?
You might be confused.
It's crazy. It is. The Big Ten is deep. There's no question about that. And that is possibly going to be a problem for a team like Indiana, who I was looking over a bunch of numbers today, and of their 13 wins, they have the team's average. All 13 of those wins come out to be a nice crisp average of 145 in the net rankings, which is not good. It stinks, as Chevy Chase said in Caddyshack. But they've and not only that, they have no margin for error. You've got number 19 Illinois come in tomorrow night after getting whipped at Iowa over the weekend, and this is the easy part of their schedule. Evan, they get through they've got back-to-back road games. Then I forget who comes in, but then you have a stretch of 5 out of 6 games against ranked teams, and the one that's not ranked is at Wisconsin, where Indiana hasn't won since Moby Dick was a minnow, man. So it does not get easier for the Hoosiers.
No, and like you pointed out, they don't really have any big wins yet. If you want to talk about something that you can rely on with this Indiana team, it's that they've beaten most, if not all, the teams that are ranked worse than them, and they've lost to all the teams that are ranked better than them. Their best win, I think, is away at Penn State, who I have ranked 62nd in the country. But then the top 4 teams they've played are Iowa, Nebraska, Gonzaga, and Louisville all about top 50 or better. And those are the games they've lost. So you need to start winning some of those games above kind of where you're punching right now in order to really, turn the script in the next month or so.
And even the Rutgers win, which looked like a nice win at the time, even though they were without Dylan Harper. Boy, Rutgers is really kind of they're getting hit by those injuries, so it's not turning out to be such a great win after all.
Yeah, I actually on Rutgers specifically, my model had Rutgers about the 70th best team in the preseason. So basically, kind of what my data was showing, which everyone has kind of figured out now, is that their best two players are those freshmen, and they're amazing, but they don't really have anything dependable outside of those two guys, and it's really showing. And when you start getting injuries as well, and you start losing some of those healthy minutes from your two-star freshmen, it's looking pretty unlikely at this point that Rutgers has a chance of making the tournament, unfortunately.
Which is pretty surprising because they're very talented. Mike DeCourcy calls them the most talented team in the Big Ten. But I think he means by the young talent, which they just haven't been able to run with that together here of late. Your site, evanmaya.com, don't forget you can go there and all kinds of analytical information there. But what do you focus? Do you focus on any particular things? I know that the particular rotations and lineups are something that you really have kind of honed in on. That's one of the things, which it's very, very cool to look at those things, man.
Yeah, if you compare what I'm doing to, some other popular sites, the main one being KenPom, obviously, a lot of what I really dive into is player evaluation. So looking at these advanced metrics that quantify how valuable is each player to their team on offense and defense. And then you can sort of extend that a lot to lineup stuff. So looking at what are the best lineups or the best predicted lineups that a team has based not only on how good those groups of players have played together, but also the individual skills present in each lineup. And you can even divide it into like how good are pairs of teammates or trios or four-man units playing together. And so that's really a lot of the bread and butter that I'm looking at during the season.
Yeah, and I'm looking over some of those top projected three-point shooters. Goes to Kobe Brea at Kentucky, one of those teams that has a new coach, but they are not missing a beat. They are rolling, but it's because of having players like that. That's a problem for Indiana. They don't have anybody that is sticking out, and I mean in almost any way. The scoring is very mediocre. The individual scoring is mediocre. They don't have a star on the team. They have some guys that were supposed to be stars, but they're not showing up. I don't like to call guys out, particularly. That's not what I'm trying to do. But hey, these guys are getting paid now, so it's okay to point out certain things like numbers. Mackenzie Mbako is where I'd start first. He has just disappeared for this team right now, and they need him as badly as anybody.
Yeah, if we look at this Indiana team coming into the season, I think what everyone was excited about was, wow, look at all these individual talented players that this team has. Umar Bala was one of the most highly regarded transfers in the entire country. You have a guy like Miles Rice coming from Washington State who had an incredible year last year and looked like a perfect candidate to have a big step up to the Big Ten. And even guys like Mbako, he started the year really hot, and you're kind of thinking, man, if he can start performing on a regular basis like this as a potential even second team all Big Ten type player, this team is going to be pretty unstoppable. And what you've really seen is that none of these players have really exactly reached the level that you've wanted from them, and you've had some major disappointments as well. Looking at the advanced player, analytics that I have, Umar Bala still comfortably rates as the best player on this team and the most important player to Indiana's success. But, outside of that, you can't really point to another player who has been dramatically above what we expected, especially for some of those transfers, as well as some of those guys that you were hoping would take an extra step this year compared to last year.
Yeah, and of course, the injury to Malik Renew plays a big part in this because it plays a big part in how Mike Woodson runs his offense, which most of the time involves both of those guys being on the floor at the same time, which I am not in agreement of because Malik Renew is not a four. And it's like, okay, what's he playing when he's in there with Fallow because he's not a four. And so therefore you don't have a four on the floor.
Yeah, so here's kind of my take, and this is, again, a lot based on the data that I have. This conversation about Ballo and Renew together has been a hot topic since basically the beginning of the season for Indiana, because it just hasn't worked out in the way that you would hope. And based on the data that I have and kind of predicting player value going forward, I mentioned this already, but Ballo rates as the best player in the team, and Renew still on a predictive basis rates as the second best player in this team. So those two guys are your two best players. And so how do you figure out how to structure the rest of your rotations around those guys to bring the best out in them? And so when I've been kind of looking at the data here, ultimately Indiana fans have not been pleased with the results that we've seen with both those guys on the floor. But really, when I look at how those two together have played, and I compare that to all other sort of pairs of players that Indiana has had, and just looking at how good does the team play when they're on the court, it's actually kind of fairly middle of the pack for kind of all lineup combinations that we see. And I think really a lot of what it comes down to ultimately is more about getting the best out of other sort of, either fringe or, semi-rotation guys that you have on the team. Because the reality is, like, for example, because of the Renew injury recently, they've been sort of forced to try stuff outside of that. And you've gotten really good play out of like Luke Goody playing with Ballo. That's been an amazing combination. But when you look at Indiana's best and worst teammate duos, the duo of like Goody and Renew has been horrible. And so there's players like that where Goody and Ballo is awesome, Goody and Renew is horrible. You can't obviously play all three together. And so there's just a lot of different tensions with this team. And it's more difficult than just saying, let's put our best five players on the court, because obviously there's a lot of nuance and you're trying to figure out the right combinations. And I think that's probably more challenging for this Indiana team than for most teams kind of, who are in the Big Ten.
Does the data, it gives you a lot, but there are some things that it doesn't give you that you have to flesh out. Does it give or offer some explanation on why a particular lineup or rotation does or does not work?
So one of the things I do at evanmedia.com is you can look at stats on like how good a lineup has played together. And that's fairly substantial and important, especially for some of your most used lineups. But one of the issues that we run into with lineup data, specifically looking at 5-man lineups, is that outside of your top 3 to 5 most used lineups, the sample size that you're going to get is so small that it's pretty tough to draw reasonable conclusions from that data, because, like your 4th or 5th best lineup might have only played maybe even 25 minutes together in the total of a season, which is not a lot, right? And so one of the things that I do is I not only look at how good the lineup has performed so far, but I actually predict how good it's going to be going forward based on not just how it's performed, but also the individual player skills present in that lineup. And so one of the things that you can do on my site is actually like rank all of the team's lineups based on their predicted performance going forward. And so one of the things that's interesting about looking at that is, number one, there have been some lineups with Ballo and Renew that have been pretty bad, but there's one lineup in particular that's actually been pretty good, and that's the lineup of the top 5 guys that I rate on the team, which is Ballo, Renew. It's Ballo, Renew, Mbako, Rice, and Galloway. Those are the top 5 players individually, and that lineup also has been pretty solid. And that is comfortably the best lineup in terms of predicted performance going forward for Indiana. But then another lineup that has shown up really high towards the top of that list is the starting lineup that Indiana is using right now with Renew out. And that's, with Goody in there. And that also has been a pleasant surprise. So trying to kind of fit all of these pieces in there is, I think, really important. And unfortunately, one of the things that you're having to deal with as well is that a guy like Kanan Carlisle has been a major disappointment for this season. His minutes have not been reliable whatsoever. I did not rate him super highly as a transfer coming into this year. I think he's been even worse than what I predicted. And so you would have really hoped that he would be kind of a safe pick in your top 6 or 7 guys. But based on the data so far, I think Carlisle actually ranks worse on the team in terms of how good the team has played with him on the court. So that's pretty concerning.
Well, that makes sense because if you go back and look at his shooting is not good. He is not shooting the ball well at all. But a part of that is, and I have noticed this the last couple of games, his shot selection choices, decision making is bad. I saw him take 2 3-point shots in the game the other night where Indiana played at home. I'm forgetting who the hell it was now. But he comes down and takes a 3-point shot right into the shot clock. He hit it, but it didn't matter. That's a bad shot. And then it wasn't that long later, he tries that again. And of course it doesn't work, but it's in the top of the shot clock. And it's like, dude, what are you doing? So it's a lot of bad decision-making that is going on as well. So, and this team doesn't look like you just said, you've got 2 completely different top lineups that are nothing like each other, because if you take Malik Renew out and have Goody in, that's a completely different style of play, and vice versa. So normally that would be a good thing, you would think, because it gives the defenses 2 different things they have to focus on, but it's not working out that way, it seems.
Yeah, and ultimately, if this team is going to play well enough down the stretch to make the tournament and win a game or 2 at least in the tournament, kind of what you were hoping for, a Sweet 16 run potentially before the season started, you kind of need all these pieces to work. Like, you can't totally phase out Renew because he's one of your best players, but you also can't totally just rely on the 2 big thing like you hoped for, because it's not been as good as you were hoping. So you kind of need to get all of this stuff working, which I think is one of the big problems, because there's kind of so many different holes and problems that they're trying to fix all at the same time.
And I wonder if when it was Renew in there and Goody was coming off the bench, he wasn't doing well. He wasn't shooting the ball that well, his 3-point shooting. Then once he started getting more minutes, his shot started to flow. He seemed like he was in the flow a lot better. But now if you take him back out and you go back to the old school, I just don't know that this team can compete with these other Big Ten teams who are they're in sync. And we hear Mike Whitson a lot talking about, well, these guys are still getting to know each other. And well, it's a little late in the year for that.
Yeah, there are plenty of other teams that have clicked a lot quicker than this Indiana team. So, you just look down the road in Lexington, and that Kentucky team with an entirely new roster has clicked from day one, which you wouldn't have expected. And so, no, I don't think that's really a reasonable excuse, because in this day and age, if you're going to bring in lots of new talent, you kind of have to figure out how to get it working pretty quick, because there's a lot of other teams that are doing the same thing, and some of them are being much more successful at it than Indiana has been.
Evan Miyakawa joining us from evanmaya.com. He is I'm calling him the stats doctor, because he is a doctor. He's got a PhD in stats, people. Man, you must love doing this, because I hate numbers. But this is fun. This it's always taking you someplace. That's the great thing. It's not like there's no end point. It keeps going.
Yeah, there's always stuff that we can be learning from data. And the thing that I'm really passionate about is, combining the objective data with kind of expert basketball knowledge. And so that's why I love talking with someone like you, Jim, because, you're watching this team every single night with your own eyes, and you've got your own conclusions. When you compare that with what I'm doing and kind of combine those 2 together, I think that's really where you see the best of both worlds come together. And so I think stuff like this is really fun. And there's always more ways for me that I find to be digging into the data to say, hey, does the data really bear out these kind of narratives that we're seeing? And a lot of times it does confirm it, and other times it leads in slightly different directions, which can sort of update the information that we have and ultimately make us smarter in the process.
And Indiana, of course, trying to make the NCAA tournament this year, and right now it's not looking good. They're 60th in the net rankings as they continue to hover down there. They've dropped a little bit, obviously, when you lose on the road by 25. Their 4 losses have come by an average of over 21 points. That's staggering. It's mind-boggling, first of all, and that you're not going to make the tournament like that either. And they have to win. They cannot lose games at home. They can't lose. I'm not going to call Illinois a must-win game, but if you lose that game, then you've got to go someplace on the road and make up for that, because a home game's not going to make up for that. You have to win all the home games. What is it going to take for this team to actually make the tournament? Because I think they're going to have to climb 15 spots in the net right now, at least.
Yeah, I agree. Right now, if you sort of look at their sort of bracket picture, they're pretty much firmly right on the cut line based on their resume. And obviously, if they continue playing as consistently as they have, it's going to be a tall task. So they definitely need to elevate their performance. Something that I look to as an interesting trend with this team that I think needs to change is one thing that I track on my website is a stat called a kill shot, which is any time that a team scores 10 or more points in a game unanswered. It's kind of a measure of how, are you able to go on these scoring runs and have that spurt ability? And one of the problems with Indiana is that they have allowed 8 kill shots this season. That's 8 separate 10-0 runs. And that is more than any other team in the Big Ten. That's almost about half a kill shot per game or so. And so basically what that points to is that this team is pretty susceptible at any time to just giving up a scoring run and kind of having the game either they're losing a lead or it's getting out of hand quickly. And that's something that you're going to need to stop and not allow for opponents to quickly flip the script, because otherwise you're just always going to be scared that no matter if the team is in the lead or in a tight contest, that it's going to flip really quickly. And so Indiana needs to kind of be more sharp in that department.
Yeah, I think we got a good dose of that when we watched them play Iowa over the weekend. They were just I don't even know how to explain it. It was crazy. You've got the turnovers that were nuts. Was it 12 first half turnovers? They were just not taking care of the ball. It didn't show up to play. It was there's a lot of times this team looks like it did not come to play a game of basketball, and that's that's on the players, it's on the coaches, it's on everybody. But the truth of the matter is what it is. And this team is not trending in the right direction right now. It doesn't seem to me, to my meager mathematical skills.
Yeah, maybe one point of encouragement for Indiana fans just looking at this team is one of the things that we often see with teams kind of during the season is that even if a team kind of underperforms kind of what their preseason expectation was, oftentimes by the time we get to March, and especially if a team can get in the tournament like Indiana, they're clearly going to be more talented than a lot of the other teams that would be seeded relative to them in that, right now they're kind of like on the 11 seed line. So let's say they end up, maybe a 9, 10, or 11 seed, right? They're going to be more talented than most of the other teams there. And often what we see is that teams kind of revert to preseason expectation based on their roster talent. And so if this team can manage to get into the tournament, I think they're going to be more well-suited to actually make a deeper run than some of those other similarly seeded teams, just because of the roster talent that they have. And especially if they end up making the tournament, it's obviously going to mean that they did some things well down the stretch. And so riding that momentum into the tournament, just get in. And I think this team could be more poised to make a run than some other teams that are kind of viewed similarly right now based on their resumes.
Yeah, they're going to have to do that now and not wait, because like I said, the easy part of their schedule is upon them, because it gets tough. It gets real and short therefore after that. And you've got a lot of teams. There are like 5 teams in the Big Ten that have kind of separated themselves. I mean, Purdue's one of those teams, obviously Michigan, Michigan State, Illinois, and Oregon. I think those 5 have, even though that 2 of those teams are 4-2 with some other teams, including Indiana, there's a line there between them. And it'll be interesting to see who ends up pulling out the win in this conference. But Dusty May and Michigan are looking pretty damn good right now.
Yeah, I've got Michigan as the top team in the Big Ten, just slightly ahead of Michigan State. But, those 4 in particular, Michigan, Michigan State, Illinois, Purdue, I have all top 16 nationally, and they're all just within a few spots of each other. So it's, pretty much anyone's game to win the Big Ten, but I am very impressed with Michigan. They're doing some really, really unique things. They play those 2 7-footers in Vlad Golden and Danny Wolf a lot together, and they're super, super good in that pick and roll with Danny kind of running the point and Vlad kind of rolling off of him. And there is no other team in the country that is playing 2 7-footers together anywhere near the amount that Michigan is, and Michigan's doing it to great effect. So I think they provide something very unique that no other team in the country is doing. And so if, Michigan kind of stays hot, I think they're going to be one of the most unique challenges for any team facing in the tournament, especially if they've not faced them during the season.
Now, Michigan with those 2 big guys are are one of those guys a shooter? Does any of them shoot it from outside?
Golden not really, but
shooter,
Wolf absolutely. Yeah, Wolf is a threat from three, and
See,
that's
that
part of why it works so well.
That's the difference maker right there.
Yes.
And that's what Indiana is not getting from Malik Renew. He's not a good 3-point shooter. I think he's shooting like 17% or something, maybe 20%. I don't know, but it's not good. But so neither is you mentioned Kanan Carlisle. His shooting is awful. Even Anthony Leal, who is known as a really good shooter, his free throw shooting is 50-something%. It's a little amazing in some of these numbers, and it really makes you wonder because Indiana was long known for having shooters. Boy, that ship sailed a long time ago, and they cannot find a shooter to save their life or can't get one here. They're going elsewhere maybe, but not having a shooter on that team has just been a blow for a long time. And Luke Goody is a really good shooter. Mackenzie Mbako is a really good shooter, but for whatever reason, it's like if his first couple of shots don't go down, he really goes into a funk and just does not play, and he can't fight through it. He hasn't fought through it in the last 2 games. He's only played like 15 minutes a game, and Indiana cannot have that from one of their best players.
Yeah, one of the things that you can do at evanmiya.com is I have player projections for all of these different skills. And so one of the things you can look at is projected 3-point shooting for every single player on Indiana's roster. And I have a way of grading that versus kind of all national players. And Indiana only has 2 players that grade as a B- or better in 3-point shooting. That's Luke Goody and Mackenzie Mbako. Everyone else is a C+ or worse. And I haven't run the numbers on that, but that's got to be one of the worst in the Big Ten, if not, kind of among high majors, just in terms of number of capable 3-point shooting threats. So, that's kind of tough. It's hard to kind of move past that if you don't really have much threat from outside the arc.
Was that B- or better? Did you say I could?
Yeah, B- or better.
B- or greater. That's, again, not only is that a detriment, you have to have NBA level talent on your roster if you have any thoughts of making a Final Four or a run like that. I think I look back over the last 6 years, each team that has won the national championship had a minimum of I think of 2 to 3 NBA draft picks on it. They may not have gone that year. They might have stayed 1 year over, but they all have those draft picks on there. And I don't know that Indiana has any right now.
Yeah, and that certainly has been a barometer for success in the tournament in the past, is the teams that make a deep run usually have some sort of NBA talent on their roster. And yeah, if you don't, it doesn't mean that you can't do well, but even some of the players that Indiana has, they probably thought they would be talked about higher in the draft conversation by this point in the year, and that's just not been the case.
No, it has not. I don't want to keep you forever because I appreciate you so much, but man, make sure you go to evanmiya.com. I think that if you are someone who digs into that stuff, you will absolutely love getting in there and messing around. It is an absolutely great site because, number one, it's different. It gives you something different than everybody else. What's one more thing maybe Indiana fans going to hope for as this season progresses with what you've seen right now with the numbers? Because they've got to turn it around without question. They've got to start hitting 3-point shots. Sometimes that doesn't mean a whole lot. It's not just that, but it's just the flow of the game. And it's just not been a good looking. The play has just not looked good.
I think one area that I feel like Indiana will do better going forward is in the rebounding department. This team profiles as a team that should be very good on the boards. But when you look at their national ranks in terms of how they've done rebounding the ball, they're barely top 100 nationally in both offensive and defensive rebounding rate. But when you look at the sort of the player projections for all these players, they rate better than that. And so I think just kind of you would hope there would be some positive regression to the mean in terms of just how good this team should be on the boards. And if they do improve in that department, I certainly think that will help. Another trend that I picked out today, kind of looking at Indiana's success, is really a lot of it does come down to how well they guard from inside the arc against their opponents. They are undefeated 9-0 this season when they hold opponents to under 52% from two, and they're winning those games by 18 points on average. And they're just 4-4 when they allow opponents to hit more than 52% of their shots from inside the arc. And so I do think that's probably going to be another key to watch going forward is, sometimes a good opponent shoots well from three. There's not a lot you can do about that. But you do have a lot more control on how you defend those shots from inside the arc. And so if Indiana can do a better job with that, I think that will really help.
Yeah, 3-point shooting defense has been an issue for Indiana. They tend to give those up a lot. If you look at the Indiana box score, you can see everybody got in on the party there. But man, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate it, because I could sit here and talk to you all day about this stuff. But hopefully we can get you back on as the season goes on. Make sure you go to Evan Maya. It's EvanMiya.com. It's that simple. But it is an absolute, a lot of you might know about it. And if not, now you do. But it's something that a lot of people use. A lot of people like me use. A lot of guys go to and use this because it is unique and it offers just a wealth of great knowledge, man. How did you get started in doing this? Evan's from Indy, by the way, originally. He's a California dude now, but originally from Indy. When did you move to the West Coast?
Yeah, that's right. I grew up about 10 minutes from Hinkle Fieldhouse, big Butler Bulldogs fan. Went to the national championship game when Gordon Hayward almost hit that shot against Duke. So, very key memory for me growing up for sure. But yeah, I ended up getting my PhD in statistics at Baylor, and I sort of created this website as kind of a side project initially while I was in school, just kind of because I love college basketball. It's always been my favorite sport. But it's really just organically grown so much over the last several years to the point where it's, widely used by Division I coaches as well as journalists and fans and people in the media like yourself. And so, I had a previous job doing consulting for NBA teams, but I've been able to focus full time now on my website, which has been really great. And I absolutely love it.
That's incredible, man. Well, we certainly appreciate it. I know I appreciate it because I love looking at that. And more importantly, I love talking to you about it because I can look at the numbers, but I can't always dig them out like you can. That's just natural for you, man, and that brain. Evan, big thanks, brother. And I cannot wait to get you back on. You're welcome to come on anytime, of course. And like I said, people, make sure you're going to evanmiya.com. Go check that out. I know a bunch of you are into that because you comment all the time, but appreciate you very much.
Thank you, Jim. This was great. Let's do it again.
Absolutely. I can't wait, man. We've got a couple of months of basketball left, plus the tournament coming around. And like football, I think basketball is going to be almost as exciting, except for the SEC might just win everything. So let's hope not, but not for Big Ten fans at least. But that's going to wrap it up for us today. Cannot thank each and every one of you guys enough. Appreciate you so much. We're back tomorrow to do it all again. Until then, I'm Jim Coyle. I will see you on the radio. Hello, sports fans. Jim Coyle with Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Thank you for stopping by our YouTube channel. Make sure to hit the subscribe and notifications toggle so you never miss a thing. All of our content up here every day. Looking forward to it. Thank you, and we'll see you on the radio.